Hey everyone, this is Josh from PMStudent.com. Today I wanted to talk about a question that I got inside PM Student e-learning. It's really more of a discussion topic, but essentially it's getting at how to get feedback from colleagues about how one performs at work. And let's see here. So in particular, project manager getting feedback from project stakeholders, team members, customer if directly involved, etc. Um, the goal is to learn about how our colleagues perceive our work, how well we do our job, uh, what we do good and what we do bad, so that we make conclusions about how we can improve ourselves. And I recorded, I'll put a link to it in this post, but I recorded something a little while ago about using a tool called PollDaddy to survey your project teams. And I went through and created a survey with some examples of what you might put in there. So I'll put a link to that here. But so there's a couple bullet points here that he had that I wanted to talk through. So should the survey be anonymous or not? And what he said was, very often such surveys are anonymous, but some people think this is a bad practice since that harms the trust within the colleagues. At least it doesn't stimulate much trust. And I guess I'd say that if you are doing a survey for your project team, then it should be anonymous. Otherwise they can just come in and talk to you face to face and tell you what's going on or send you an email. And you should definitely be open to that type of feedback. Any type of feedback is good feedback, even if it's constructive criticism. But if you're doing a survey, actually, the reason why you might want to do a survey is because you have people who maybe don't want to come forward and share their feedback in a public forum or even via email. Maybe they feel a little bit uncomfortable about that, especially if it's negative feedback. Sometimes people feel conflicted, even if there isn't any kind of a conflict of interest there, or their job wouldn't be at risk if they told you, some feedback. Sometimes people just are like, it's not worth it for me to put my neck out there in order to give some feedback about this. So I'm just gonna keep my mouth shut. So in those cases, a survey sometimes can be a good way to get some anonymous feedback and pinpoint the things that need to get worked on or the things that you're doing right. So I would say if you're doing a survey, it's going to be anonymous. Private one-on-one or with a wider audience with the whole team, I'd say that, I just did this the other day with my group where we did a sprint retrospective. And as part of that sprint retrospective, we talked about the work that we did, but then we also talked about how's our process working. And so we collected some feedback there. Now, all the feedback that I got was positive feedback. So, and I was hoping for some constructive criticism too, so that we could, refine the process a little bit. So maybe on my team, maybe I should do something like this where I do more of an anonymous feedback mechanism like a survey. Um, so yes, it could be in private or with a wider audience. How often to collect such feedback? Well, in the video that I'm going to link to below, I talked about doing it once a month as kind of like the status of the project, and it's not something that everyone's going to respond to or anything like that, but you might get 10 to 20% of your project team to respond to something like that on a regular basis. If they have something to say, then they'll be more likely to respond to it. So that might be a good way to collect some feedback. I wouldn't do it any more often than once a month, though. That's getting to be a little bit too much. What questions to include in the survey? And in the video, I talked about some different questions. Mostly, I think that open free text questions are best. If you've, especially on a project team, because you're really trying to get a sense for, I'd rather ask open-ended questions and get some feedback rather than constraining them to option A, B, C, or D. So, and then in what format. So, again, I think that rather than using a scale or a set of multiple choice questions, in some cases you could. In the video I showed you using some multiple choice questions, but for the most part I think that the free text feedback is going to be probably the best route, because you're not constraining them, You're just asking an open-ended question and you let them go at it. And then when you're looking at those survey results, you just take a look at what everybody said. You don't need to, there's really no compiling of statistics or anything like that when you're talking about a survey as small as a project team. Surveys that are very large, like some of the surveys that I do for PM Student to get an idea of what people are looking for. Those I'll have multiple choice questions, and I'll do some statistical analysis on it to see what people are looking for. But for the most part, I think for a small project team, well, for any project team really, the open free text format is going to be better. So, and that's really about it. I mean, I think the most important thing is that you don't want to rely on surveys as your primary method of getting feedback either. Hopefully, your environment is open enough and people feel like they are entitled to give feedback, whether it's positive or negative, and not get their hands slapped. So if you're in an environment where people feel like the only way that they can give feedback is through an anonymous survey like this, then that could be a problem. Now, and like I said, there's going to be some people that regardless of what you do, just their personality type, they're only going to give you feedback through something anonymous because they're just not comfortable doing that. But if that's a phenomenon on your team as a whole, then you should probably look at yourself, look at your organization, and see why that is, because people shouldn't be afraid to give feedback. They should be able to, in a team meeting, they should be able to just shout it out if they're inclined to do such a thing, or come into your office or send you an email. So one of the key things there is to analyze and think about how you are responding and how the organization responds to feedback, especially negative feedback or adjusting feedback where they're saying, this really isn't working very well, and, is there a way that we can improve it? One thing that I see is a lot of managers will say, well, if you come to me with negative feedback, make sure that you have a solution already thought out. And that's a good, that's a good rule of thumb for you to have as an employee. If you are going to give some feedback like that, try to come up with a solution. But as a manager, I think it's counterproductive to require that or to scold people for not having a solution already, because sometimes they I don't know, I thought about it and I couldn't come up with a solution, but I wanted to bring it to your attention so that you can think about it and maybe put some of the other resources on the team towards this problem and getting it solved. So don't do that. I mean, and anything else that you're doing that could be keeping people from giving feedback in the future, because if they have a negative experience, if they have some negative feedback for you about anything and it's a negative experience for that, you put them through some sort of pain or it's uncomfortable for them to give it to you, then they're not going to do it again. So don't create that kind of culture. Make sure that you're very open and even grateful, that you display that you're very grateful for the feedback that they're giving to you, and that will help make sure that you get more feedback in the future. And I hope that helps. If you have any comments or if you want to add anything to this, just leave a comment below. And this is Josh from pmstudent.com.